Rocket in the sky, catch your eye, please don't cry. Wait goodbye, I survived all them dark cold nights. Star, I am bright, I don't die, I won't lie. I'm just trying to be the best I could be and achieve my dream.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Sober Stew podcast. You are listening to and watching an addiction recovery podcast. Today, my guest Darren, all the way from Edinburgh, I believe. Darren, how you doing?
Not bad, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm wicked, mate. I'm wicked. And listen, thank you for coming on. You was invited to come on because I see your page on Instagram. I've got two friends actually, but I've got a very good friend who suffered with gambling addiction all of his life, and I believe still suffers today. And from what I know about gambling addiction, it is one bastard of an illness, and I want a little bit more information on it for myself, but also for our listeners and our viewers as well. So, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. I think everybody's got a friend, don't they?
Yeah,
Everybody
man.
now.
Let's go back to how you believe your gambling addiction first started.
See, I've thought about this a lot over the years, and I've come to realise it probably started when I was a kid. The reason I say that is because I didn't kind of put it all together until later on in life. But I can remember every single time that I'd won something when I was a kid. So that's from your claw machines at the arcades and raffles at the school and that kind of thing.
Yep.
And I remember how it felt. So I can remember even when I was 7 or 8 feeling lucky for the first time. I knew how that felt. And there was a claw machine at Butlins. Used to go on these family holidays, and there was like a flaw with the machine. So it was like monkeys had Velcro hands. It's a very odd story, but just to give you an idea of the excitement of it, instead of one monkey getting pulled out of the machine, there was about 20 odd. So it was a design flaw, and I just remember how elated and excited I was. I felt like I'd won something huge that, and very, very lucky. And that kind of stuck with me, and just throughout the years, little kind of micro things like that where I'd always remember and I'd always sort of chase those feelings. So when I was a kid at school, it was like, you know, getting rid of their football stickers and trading and putting coins against the wall and playing cards and stuff like that. And I would say that it became problematic when, and I used to do sports betting and stuff as well. So my dad played football, so every weekend we'd go to the football, and there was always a betting about with the lads. But I would say everything was relatively under control until casino games started coming. So my weekends and my rituals were always go to the bookies with my pals, put on like a sports, like a football accumulator, and then be done. And 9 times out of 10, your bet's not coming in, and
No,
you
that's right.
accept that, and you move on with your evening. And but I started going to bookies, and when they put in the fixed odd betting terminals, so your roulette machines and your slots and stuff, as soon as I started playing them, the writing was on the wall for me, and I would spend hours in the bookies instead of popping in
Hours,
and out for
hours.
hours. So I
Literally
mean,
straight away. So as soon as they started coming in, you dabbled with it, and then
mhm.
was like, bang, you're there.
Well, because it looked so easy, right? So you're
Right.
going into bookies, you're going up to the counter, and you're seeing these lads that are sitting on the machines, right? And at that time, they were just sort of coming in, and they were becoming quite popular, and people were coming in and out, and it was a bit of like everyone surrounding these machines, just keeping an eye on how easy it looked to win a lot of money in a short amount of time.
Okay.
So you're putting on a number, and you're pulling out, whatever it would be, and you're going up to the counter with your ticket, and then you're leaving. And to me, I was like, well, that's just a very easy way to make money. Why am I wasting my time on sports betting? Um, and you start to kind of look into patterns and numbers that haven't come up in a while and things like that. So you think everybody that's there, they think they know what they're doing. Um, but once I was sat on that machine, I knew nothing. All I knew was that I was getting really, really hooked on these machines, and I was finding it hard to get up off the stool and leave. I would
Right.
spend all my free time in and out of the bookies.
So when you say that you start working out patterns and stuff, and you think you know, right? Does that consume your thinking when you're not playing as well?
Well, yeah, because you start to I mean, I started to kind of rationalize in my head of what I was doing and why I was doing it, and I was starting to think, maybe that machine, the usual, that machine had already paid out before,
Right.
or that kind of thing, and maybe I need to try a different machine, or try a different game, or try a different strategy, and that kind of thing. Um, but it was, it's a hard one to say because for me, like I say I went through my whole life exposed to gambling, and I may or may not have had a problem with gambling, and I feel that if it wasn't gambling, it was going to be something else. But those machines, what caught me off guard is just how quickly it happened, where I went from okay, I'm gambling on this now. To shit, I don't know if I can stop gambling on this, and I'm not quite sure what's happening to me, and I'm not sure where I can turn or what I can do. Um, and it just started consuming me, and my mental health
Yeah,
took
yeah.
a massive dip in that time because it was just consuming. And there's no, it's very lonely kind of existence. I was never a casino gambler because I didn't want to gamble in front of people. I don't want that pressure on like a blackjack table or the roulette wheel or whatnot. But those machines, you can just sit and get into the zone and just pile your money in.
When was this? What era are we talking? What sort of year are we talking, Darren?
Mid 2000s. So I would say I started going in there 2004, 2005, that
Okay,
kind of
and
thing.
back. So that weren't on the blower then. That weren't on the phone. That weren't on no apps and all that gambling on no phones. Then was it?
Believe it or not, I consider myself very fortunate that I gambled
Yeah.
when I did. If I had
Fucking
if I
hell.
had if I had a smartphone back then, which I didn't, I was a couple of years off it.
Yep.
I don't know what the hell would be going on. I mean, I would go and gamble in the bookies, and then I would literally just have a mental warfare every single day trying to leave the bookies and not go back in. But the problem I had no safety net, so I would go back home and I would just open my laptop and continue gambling on my
Oh man,
laptop. You
I'm
know,
feeling your
and
pain. I'm
yeah,
feeling your
it's
pain. Do
like,
you know what I mean? It's fucking. I can put myself there with you. Even though I've never had a gambling addiction, I feel that, like proper feel that, like fighting to leave there, and then like you say, can't wait to get home to open that laptop up.
well, let me put it this way. There was days, and quite a lot of days, I was happy that I blew all my money because I knew that I couldn't gamble anymore. So I knew if I had money in my pocket, and I did quite often back then because I worked in bars and restaurants and stuff, and I had tips. So I always had access to money. Um, and I knew whether it be 20 quid or 100 quid, it's all going back in the machine, and it was just a matter of time. So my whole day would be spent with just little kind of micro justifications of trying to kind of make sense of what I'm doing. So I would make promises to myself that if I could just break even or whatnot, it was never really about winning the money back. It was just about finding that middle ground within my own mental health that I could say, right, I've got that clarity for these next few minutes. Now I can leave. Now I can go home. It was never
Okay.
about, okay, I'm not leaving until I've won 200 quid or 300 quid. It was, I'm not leaving until I'm ready to leave. And sometimes that was, okay, the only time I'm ever going to be ready to leave is I have no more money left because I cannot physically put any more money back in that machine. Um, so, and the sad reality for this, and I've spoken to so many people over the years that gambled the same way I did. The hardest part of it is dusting yourself off, pretending like everything's fine, heading back home, living your normal life. I kept down work. I realize now that I was probably very poor at my work back then, even though I feel like I wasn't.
Yeah.
But I turned up to work, I did my stuff, I kept my relationships down. People knew I gambled, but they had no idea that it was getting that far.
Yeah.
Um, and that kind of takes its toll on you, and you keep doing that day in and day out. Eventually something breaks.
No, do you know what, mate? I'm sitting here and I am feeling. I like to put myself into people's mindsets because I like to. It's sad or what I don't know, but I like to feel that. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's real, and I'm thinking, if I'm abusing alcohol, if I'm abusing cocaine, if I'm abusing another substance, a mild substance, it's physically. People can see it. Yeah, people can see that when you were doing what you were doing, it's not visible to the masses, is it? You
No.
can you can cover it up, which makes it probably fucking even more dangerous. No,
hmm I can spot a gambler a mile off,
right?
right?
You can,
It's
yeah, yeah,
all
yeah,
it's
yeah,
all it's all very subtle, very very subtle. The eyes say a lot. You get a sort of 1,000 yard stare. I think that's what they call it. Sort of dead behind the eyes, kind of try to keep it together, overcompensating. And if you know what to spot, you'll know. It's like, especially if I'm sitting in a bar or something like that,
yeah,
and I'll see a group of lads, betting or whatever. I know the lad who's nipping the toilet every 2 minutes, having a cigarette every 2 minutes. If the phone comes everywhere, but it's just you see the kind of urgency and the need for people when they've got a bet on or an active bet on, or they're compulsively gambling, that they need to do that in private. And I see it all the time, unfortunately. Um, it's sad, and it's when you're so stuck in your own head like that, it can be very very difficult to see where to turn and what to do, because you number one, you don't feel that anyone's fully going to understand what's going on, because as I said, I didn't fully understand what was going on. I knew I was gambling, but I'd never seen anything like this in terms of shit. Like, I didn't even know where to go from here. It got to a
Yeah.
very dark place for me where I was like, well, this is it now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be this person. I'll just gamble. I'll be living week to week, month to month. I'll gamble all my money at the beginning of the month, and I'll just live like that. I'll ruin my relationships, and that'll be me.
Is
That's
that
what
what,
I am.
and you accepted that? Yeah.
I accepted that. Yeah, I thought, well, I mean, it's how else? What else am I going to do? Like, it's just so hard because you think about gambling all day, every day, and you're so completely drawn. It's like you've rewired your brain where you're just completely prone to
Okay.
gamble. You know,
Yeah, mate.
um, and because it's so all consuming, you just accept it.
Darren,
It's
and I'm
it's hard.
assuming, are you not talking to no one either at this? Are you not telling
No,
anyone how you're feeling? Nah, no one.
no, because I had no. I mean, it took me years to articulate this. You know, like
Right.
I remember, when I told the day that I told my girlfriend, who's now my wife, so she's been very supportive. The day I told her, it's because I had to tell her, because it was very very clear that something was wrong with me, and I just couldn't hide it anymore. I was desperate to say something. Um, the night before, I'd gambled 5 grand in roulette, and I was putting £500 spins on black and red. That's where it was with me. So, and the next day I desperately went to the bank to try and close my account just before that money came out, and I knew that wouldn't have worked. It was just a case of, well, I don't know what to do. And then I always remember the guy at the bank counter. He turned the screen round to me and he showed me all the transactions, and
No.
it was like me reading someone else's bank statement. I just couldn't believe that was me.
Oh man. Yeah.
You're talking dozens of websites, dozens of different companies. That by this time, this is me all doing my damage on the laptop now. um, Different promotions, different places, and I had no recognition of like what was going on, who that was,
Darren, how
why
did that make
why
you
I'm doing
feel?
it.
How did that make you feel when he showed you that?
Oh, I lost, completely lost.
Right.
But I kind of needed that. That was kind of the moment for me to. It was like holding a mirror up. No one had done that before, and that was like, it was just like, right, this is literally your day-to-day activity. This is your life. So, what do I do with that? And I went home and told my wife about it.
So he done you a
And I
favour
went
then,
from
that
there.
geezer.
Well, hey, the banks could do a lot of favors in terms of not letting you gamble thousands of pounds. You know what I mean? But let's not get into that, because they know they've got all the data on you. They understand
They
with
know,
all these
didn't
big
they?
transactions. They know,
They know,
if you've got
mate.
thousands. It was just a case of, mate, you can't withdraw the money because all this money belongs to the bookies now. I was like, right, okay, but yeah, and that was kind of like my little wake up moment.
Living in your relationship with your girlfriend, who's now your wife back then, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that you live dishonestly if you're gambling like you was gambling.
I'd like to think I didn't, but clearly I did. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, the first thing she had mentioned to me was like, "How can I trust you?"
Yep.
And that's a fair point. How could she trust me? And of all the things that can break a relationship, the fact it was my personal gambling, I found that quite hard, because it's like, well, I'm trying my best here, but with this, I'm really, really struggling. So, I mean, it was a case of like, well, she basically said to me, I will support you, but you need to do something about it, and you've got to try and get on top of this." So I had to kind of make that promise to her. Um, and it was just a case of, it was still difficult because I still had no idea of where and how and what I could possibly do. And but I didn't want to lose her. So again, to add that personal layer on top of like the financial layer that was kind of there to be seen, and then if you add that sort of personal layer, that was enough incentive for me to turn things around and kick on. So at that time, I just couldn't possibly think of losing her.
No.
Um, so yeah, she, all things considered, she took it well. And but she did say that the trust was broken, and
Okay.
I had to go some way to kind of build that trust back up again, because we're talking about, how can you build a life with someone when they're not financially responsible? And that's a fair point. How can I go on a mortgage? How can I, be trusted with, all the grown up stuff? So I needed her to help me, not in terms of giving me money, in terms of just taking control of my finances, to give me some breathing space and some time to work on myself.
Trust is a big thing, obviously, in a relationship. So you could look at that and go, like, if you don't know that your partner's suffering from this illness, from this addiction, um, there must be, what you're spending your time on, what you're spending your money on, must have been a dishonest level at some point. Do you know what I mean? And it's like,
Mhm.
so yeah, that takes time. So credit to her, man, for doing what she did and for the support that she gave you, because it clearly helped, didn't it?
Well, it does help, but because I'm very visible now in what I do and the projects I'm involved in, it helps her because there's no hiding. There's
Hmm.
nowhere for me to hide. There's no secrets because this is what I do every day of my life is like working and in different gambling harms sort of bits and pieces of different projects. And this is what I do now. So I'm I'm very visible. She for the first few years she would ask, and is everything all right and whatnot. And she's perfectly entitled to ask those questions. It was down to me to not take it personally and to understand where she's coming from. And she doesn't ask now because she knows when we mention the word gambling now, it's not got a negative connotation to it. It's all very positive and it's all
Yeah,
different
yeah.
pieces I'm doing. So.
And that's because of the work you're doing. So tell me about the work you're doing. Let's hear about the work you're doing in this
Well,
field.
So I mean, I made a promise to myself that if I could go 2 years gamble and temptation free, I added temptation onto that sentence because I feel that's important. I feel like it's not just enough to be gamble free. I think you have to be really in control of your
Okay, yeah,
mindset and
yeah.
what's going on. Then I would aim to give back to others. So I emailed all the treatment and support providers to ask to volunteer. Basically, no one got back to me apart from one, and they invited me to do their crisis support line. So I did 2 years voluntary work with them twice a week. And then from there, I just started building connections and whatnot. And I've done various bits and pieces, but at the moment, I work with the treatment and support providers in the UK. It's like a sort of like a consultancy, lived experience perspective, just to kind of give them feedback on their services based off lived experience. So we have a survey that we run, and anyone that uses those services can get in touch with us, and I get in contact with them, and we sit and have Zoom calls and whatnot, and I collate all the evidence and feedback, and we basically link in with them. And I've got it's like a Scottish forum up here, like a Health and Alliance forum that I was involved in to try and kind of get my finger on the pulse in terms of what change is coming and all the
Right.
politics and all that kind of side of things. And yeah, and social media and different website work and stuff like that. I work for a couple of small little gambling
Okay.
charities. So
I've still got the thing in my brain where you said you sent off a lot of emails and no one come back to you bar one. Like, and you was offering your service to volunteer. Is that right?
yeah, and lived experience wasn't in the vocabulary back then. I feel that now it seems to be very much a push and a very popular kind of buzzword to use lived experience.
Yeah.
Gambling is only just now becoming mainstream in terms of and this is all down to people doing hard work trying to raise awareness and trying
Yeah.
to do a lot of work and breaking down the stigma and whatnot. They're starting to see the benefits of lived experience, whereas back then I just don't think it was ever valued. I would
Okay.
say I appreciated just how much I hate that they use the word expert by experience, which I don't like that term at all because we're not an expert in anything, but there is a lot of value and a lot of there's a lot to be said for folk that have been through that. The one thing I noticed when I volunteered in the crisis line, my quality of calls were slightly different to everyone else's because you can even just by text people can tell when they're talking to someone who understands what they're going through. They know just by the way you type and the way that you can relate.
Yeah, yeah.
They understand pretty quickly, and you tend to get a lot more from people when they can have that instant trust and relatability to you,
Yeah.
and they'll open up quicker.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. So I'm thinking there's the people who was working in the gambling addiction field back then, say mid 2000, early 2004, 5, 6. Would you say that they didn't come from the addiction background, but they were educated to a level of whatever the education was? Is that what you mean?
uh, so I would say that's still the case now in a lot of
Is
places,
it?
but yes, I would say that a lot of you get a lot of kind of cross sort of counselling that maybe have a background in drugs and alcohol, and it's now being reused or repurposed for gambling. However, there I feel that treatment support's improved massively because there is now an understanding the need for not only lived experience but to treat gambling as its own entity. You can't just copy and paste something from that's already in different services, and so we are starting to see now a difference in the variety of support that's been offered. Not just standard CBT and counselling. They're starting to see the value in peer support, group work, outdoors or therapy work, and that kind of thing, connecting people. So I feel that things have gotten a lot better. I still feel that gambling specifically as like a skill in terms of like a professional skill in helping people. I still think that's lacking in a lot of places.
Yeah, yeah.
But it has come on leaps and bounds. And as I say, there's a lot more being offered than there was certainly.
And that's good news. And what you just said then about all the other different kinds of support, therapies other than just CBTs, for example, group therapy, massive. I would have thought, opening up and getting rid of that shame and guilt maybe is massive, isn't it? As well, it is. And I want to ask you a question because I don't know the answer to it. It's like my and this might sound sexist, so I apologise to anybody, but my first thought is when I think of a gambling addict, I think of a fella, right? That's how I generally do. That's how my mind works. Would you say the large proportion are men, or is there a big crossover?
I would say that I mean, I don't want to go in percentages, I don't know, but I would say that you're not getting the data in terms of the amount of women that are gambling. I feel that there's not only is there a huge stigma for gamblers, I think there's an added layer if you're a woman who gambles.
Yeah,
There is a massive amount of women that gamble.
yeah.
I think that there there's a variety of reasons for this, but like I would suggest that um, women gamble behind closed doors. They don't particularly show it. I don't think you're stereotypical of what you would maybe expect a woman to gamble on, like the bingo halls down with the girls and all that kind of thing. The way that the advertising would make it sound like is that it's a social thing where everybody's getting together and gambling. It's just a different product. I know that there's been a huge amount of women that get addicted to the bingo sites because they are very fast paced. You can put on a huge amount of bets a short amount of time. I think there's added pressures. I think when you start to think of maybe women that are at home and dealing with childcare and that kind of thing, and there's huge pressure on their shoulders, and maybe it's very taboo for them to even have anything to do with gambling when they've got those pressures at home, or they're at least seen in society's eyes to be the carer or the provider for the family. Um, you know, there's been campaigns recently to try and get more women to open up about their gambling, and I have seen more of it. It's definitely there. It's just not being. It's not in the forefront.
Hello, guys. Hope you're enjoying this week's episode. Just a quick break here. I want to ask you a big favour. If you are enjoying the show, enjoying the episode, enjoying the podcast, can you please subscribe, please like, please share? I just want to let you know how important that is. The bigger this channel gets, the more people that see it means that we can affect people's sobriety in a positive way, their addiction recovery. We might change a life, we might save a life. Enjoy the rest of the episode. Thank you. So there's a long way to go, isn't there? There's a long way to go still, and like you say, things are changing. Like I will just put it out, I have got issues, and I've got beef with the amount of adverts and sponsorship that I see from betting organisations. I've always got issues with it. I don't bet, right, but I'm fully aware of what addiction does to people. Been there myself and worked with a lot of people, and it's like I hate it, mate. I can't stand it. I can't stand seeing. I can't stand seeing all the alcohol advertising, but the gambling one and that get be gambling aware hashtag thing at the bottom of the screen that you can barely see, or it says it and bang and it's done. It's like,
Mhm.
mate, I don't like it.
I don't particularly like it either, but I don't. I mean, I'm numb to it because it's
Right.
so. I've left myself open to all that deliberately because I'm in a good space in my recovery where that it doesn't bother me.
Okay.
It's not to say that it doesn't bother other people. I know
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
massively triggering for people that are especially early on in recovery, um, and I've kind of beat this drum for a long time. I don't think banning it is. If you asked me this question like 3 years ago, I would have said ban the whole lot, get rid of it. I don't think banning things particularly helps in any sort of area in your life. I think with the advertising for it needs to be massively reduced. I think it at least needs to be put past the watershed. I think the social media companies need to do a lot in terms of
Yeah.
giving people the power to not see these things in the first place. The token it's very tokenistic, and you were talking about the just be gamble aware and whatnot, and when the fun stops and all the rest of it, take time to think. It's all very tokenistic. I remember growing up. You remember the Hebs adverts and whatnot, and
Yeah, mate.
the lad selling his PlayStation for drugs and
That's
things
it.
like that. I remember all that stuff. Very, very
Mhm.
hard hitting. You know, the drink driving adverts were very hard hitting.
Always. Yep.
I'd like to see a public health approach to advertising where these adverts are, just as prominent as the gambling adverts you see, or side by
They're
side with
needed,
them.
mate. They're needed because
You
when
know,
you look at the gambling websites or the gambling adverts, they're very glitzy and they're very, it's a bit like the when you see alcohol adverts or whatever it might be. It's all very Hollywood, isn't it? Let's have it right. It's
everybody's
not.
having a good time.
Mate, it's
Everybody's
having a
having a
good
good
time.
time.
It's not.
Oh,
It's not showing you a picture of you sitting in your room with your laptop out, pulling your hair out, or running to the bank and trying to close your account before that $5 comes out. Ain't
yeah.
showing you that side of it, is it?
And can I just say it's funny that you mentioned that, because I literally tried to pull my hair out after a bet
Did
one
you?
night. Yeah, I think people need to understand how unhinged you can get.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
you're sitting there, laptop, you're watching your spins come in, nothing's going right for you, and once you can't quite believe you've gambled that money, and there's no going back. To me, it was trying to feel centered again, to try and feel something again, because you get very erratic, and the dopamine and your excitement levels are just through the roof. It's like you're beside yourself, and then you become very, very numb and very kind of detached from yourself, and then it's kind of one extreme to the other. And for me, it was trying to feel something again. So I would, down a bottle of wine to try and level myself out. I would have a shower to try and wash the feeling off. I would like smash furniture in my room, scream into my pillow. I try to pull my hair out. It was like just trying to kind of feel, it was like a level of self harm, just trying to bring myself back to center so I can think logically again. But then, because the gambling takes over your brain like that, you don't know when you're going to think logically again. And when you do, it's such a sad kind of point you've got yourself to, because it's like, okay, I've got myself to this point. Could I not think about gambling for a minute just so I can get my head straight and see where I can go with this and see what I can
Yeah,
do? But then that urge to gamble again just takes over so quickly. So then you're back to square one, and then you
yeah.
start doing all the same damage all over again.
And
Um,
is the urge to gamble initially to change the way you feel? Is that why do you think that urge is there?
this is a thing that this is a thing that it's taken me years to really sort of hash out in myself with
Yeah,
why am I doing it? And I think
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
few reasons. The exposure hasn't helped. Like, so you're growing up, it was so normalized,
Yep.
like that hasn't helped. Um, and I'm always have been like a very impulsive person, and I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 27, and that helped. And it
Hmm.
wasn't I always say it wasn't really the medication. It's not about the medication. It was the fact that it was the first time that someone had put me under the spotlight and given me some, like, this may be the reason why you do certain things. So I was able to do all the hard work on myself from there because of someone else telling me that. So that helped at that time. Um, and yeah, it's just a case of, like, it's hard going, and it's not an all one. There's not one answer to it, and everybody's very different. I think that everything just sort of fell into place for me at the right time, because I told my missus, I did the work, I got the diagnosis of ADHD, I got a life coach, which helped me massively. So I was able to do that work because I had some accountability. So I've got my psychiatrist now, I've got my wife, I've got a coach who I'm
Yeah,
accountable
man.
to. So I've got those things in place, and I didn't
Yeah,
have
yeah.
that before.
So on a daily basis, in recovery, like I'm in recovery, when you're not searching to change the way you feel in that way, are you? That's how recovery works. I always used to describe it as like a hole in the soul, right? That's the only way I could think of the logical term to describe it. I had a hole in the soul. It was changed the way I felt, and I would use any substance to do that. Right? That's how I
Mhm.
was. I'm wondering, is gambling addiction a similar feeling inside?
Yeah, I realise you're asking the same question again. I'll go off in tangents.
So do I, mate. So don't
Yeah, yeah.
stress.
No,
I
I'll
won't
come
go
back
with
to it.
you.
No, I realise now that all my big losses were at times where things just I wasn't completely happy. And that, to me, it's a very good example. I went traveling when I was younger, and I had gambled before I went traveling, and I was in a really bad place before I left. But when I left, I didn't gamble at all. And I think the
Nothing.
reason for that is because I was mentally stimulated. There was enough going on in my world. I wasn't stuck in a job that I hated. I wasn't stuck in a town that I hated. I grew up in Aberdeen, where when all my mates went off to uni and worked offshore and stuff like that, I was kind of plodding away in the family business, not really doing much, out drinking every night and whatnot. And I felt very unfulfilled. But when I was traveling, it's like, I had so much stimulation that I had no time to even think about gambling. But it's every time I've stopped over the years, as soon as I stop, gambling sort of creeps back in. It's only been the last couple of years I felt comfortable in my own company, because my dark place comes when I'm sitting at home. I don't have anyone else around. Like my wife's, away back home visiting her family or whatnot. I struggle then because I am completely accountable for
Yeah,
myself,
mate.
and I've got to get through the day. I'd have days where I'd watch the clock and be like, "Is this an appropriate time to go to bed?" Because
Yeah,
I
I get
can't
you.
I can't sit in my own thoughts like that. So the times I came when I came back to gambling over the years and had relapses and whatnot, it was always at times where I was unhappy, like
Yeah,
unhappy with my job. I'd slowed down, or I wasn't working, or something like that, or I was on my own too much, and it was just escapism for me. People don't really understand that when you think about gambling. I think one of the kind of stigmas and one of the sort of misunderstandings of it is like everybody's chasing a jackpot. Everybody's chasing money at some point. Yeah, when I was younger, when I was betting, I'm not betting to lose my money. I'm hoping to win. But it's the reality is, when I got to that stage, in terms of my mental health being so poor with gambling, if I had won a jackpot, it would have been the worst possible thing to happen with me, because all of that money would have went back into gambling, like
yeah.
all
But
of it,
did you think that
100%.
then? As you're gambling, then did you think that then, if I win this, this is going to be the worst thing, or is that you looking back with hindsight?
A bit of both.
Okay.
It's not. I would sit and have slots. It's just, my wife would be sleeping next to me in bed. I'd have the laptop open at one side. I'd wait for her to go to sleep. I'd put a headphone in. I would put money in the slots, and I knew I wasn't going to win. 100%
Right.
wasn't going to win. But I would sit and watch my money drain, and that's how I would go to sleep. I would sit and watch my
Really?
money go. Yeah, and it was
Oh
just that.
man.
It's like, it's that craving. It's like something I need to do. If I win, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because I'll have more money. Okay, and that's maybe going to get me through the month or pay the holiday that I was wanting to go on or whatever. But also that's a burden, because I've got more money to gamble, and 99% sure that all that money is going to go back to gambling. So it was just a case of, I need money to gamble, but having money to gamble just
Is it
puts you in
bad?
an awkward predicament. So
So how does it work when you get paid? I don't know how you get paid. So say if you get paid at the end of the month or whatever, and you're in
mhm.
that mindset, and you've got your wife and you've got your home, what do you do when you get paid? Is that like a?
I
Is that like?
I was very, very fortunate, and I count myself very lucky that she's very, very savvy with money, and very financially responsible. So I always made sure that, if I was going to fuck up my life, then okay, it might fuck up hers indirectly, in terms of, I've gambled all my money. At least it's my money. I'm not gambling hers. So I would always make sure, as soon as I got paid, that money got transferred straight into an account where the rent
Okay,
was
got you.
paid and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
But the rest of the month, I was just, trying to make excuses why I couldn't do certain things and whatnot. Like, it got to a point where I couldn't really afford to go out. When I was younger, I didn't going out quite often and whatnot, because I'm from Aberdeen, but I just moved to Edinburgh at that time, so I'm making friends and, new work, new connections, whatever. Just waiting for my tips, and, getting paid weekly and whatnot, just waiting for bits of money. But um, it was just a daily struggle, in terms of, like, I knew that pretty quickly I'd be out of money, and then how am I gonna hide that for the rest of the month? How am I gonna start saying no to things? How am I gonna get out of this and whatever? Um, I was always too proud to borrow money and stuff like that. It never got that far with me, and I'm so glad it didn't. Um, but it's all relative. So I didn't get paid a huge amount of money, but it's still just that daily kind of grind of just losing money, making a bit more money, losing money, making a bit more money, and then losing all your money. It got so exhausting.
Do you know the word in my head as you're talking is exhausting, right? That I'm feeling that for you. That is draining, man. Like every fucking day, and then you got to think of reasons of why you can't do anything that month, anything, and then that must put a thought in your head, thinking if I got a couple of quid, I could try and gamble that to get a more couple of quid, then I would be able to do it, and then you're back in that cycle again, aren't you?
Yeah, there was days like that too, where it's like, okay, well, as I said, every day was just a justification of trying to kind of make sense of why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I tell my own stories, I make my own narrative in my head if it makes me feel better. So I could be sitting on in the bookies, and I could be like, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll treat myself. If I win, 30 quid from this machine. I'll go next door and buy a pint, and I'll sit there and drink a pint, and that'll be my. At least
Treat.
I'll have got something good from the day. You know,
Yeah.
I'll go home. But I'll be lucky if I win that 30 quid and make it to the pub, because it's the likeliest that 30 quid's just going back in the machine.
Yeah, do
So
you know what? You've made me remember a time in my life. I can't remember how old I was. I think I was 21, 22 ish, and I just got a job. Um, it was for the East London Advertiser, yeah. And it was selling advertising space in the newspaper. And at lunchtime, the guys who worked in there used to come out and they walked down to the betting shop, and I went with them every day when they went there. And I'd never really betted because my thought process was I want my money for my booze, for my alcohol. That's where I wanted the money for. But when I was going in there over lunchtime, and I forgot all about this until we're talking today, I did get the bug a little bit when I was in there quite easily, but there was something always going, don't fucking do it because you won't have no money to go out tonight. And it was like, but I feel like that if I hadn't have got the sack from that job pretty soon after, which I did, not long after I started it, that could have become a problem, because I feel like if you've got a real addictive personality, mindset, whatever you want to say, any of that's open to you, isn't it?
yeah, for sure. As I said to you earlier, if it wasn't gambling, it would have been something else with me. I knew that.
Yeah.
Um, I you know, I the kind of the social aspect of gambling, where like all the lads putting a bet on and stuff. I actually look back on that fondly, because it was the
Okay.
only time in my gambling sort of life that I was happy gambling and
Yeah,
in
man.
control of gambling. Our it was part of our weekend and part of our ritual. It was putting a bet on. You'd all sit in the pub, but you're not sitting like now where everyone's on their phones and betting and playing and
Yeah,
whatnot. You've literally got a piece of paper sitting in front of you,
that's it.
and you're laughing at your mates when their bet's down. And if you're
Yeah.
winning your bet, you're buying a round for your pals. So I looked back on that fondly. Um, I I just
That's fun.
could not.
That's fun, isn't it?
I cannot see the joy in it now. For me, I mean, maybe I've got tinted lenses on now. I can't see the joy in sitting in the pub in where everyone's just betting constantly on their phone constantly all night
No.
and through a match and stuff like that. It's a totally different beast now. And it doesn't seem like a social thing. You see when you see lads doing this and stuff, they're all glued. They're all glued into their phones. Um, and I guess that's just a reflection on wider society in general, because everyone's glued in their phones. But um, simpler times, it turned dark. Like it's. I feel bad for this generation that's been
Yeah, man.
completely brought up on smartphones, because
Yeah.
the accessibility is just insane. It's unreal.
Do you know
Um,
what? Right, I'm gonna shoot off on a tangent here because I got on a bus here. So I haven't got on a bus for I can't even tell you how many years, but I've done it so my 16-year-old knew how to get to work. So I showed him the route, etc. Got on the bus, and I was sitting on the as I'm sitting there with him. There was this young girl. She was a mum on the bus, and her baby was in a pram. And I don't know, we're on the bus 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and she was on her phone the whole time like that. She didn't engage with her child once. Like when people just sort of leaning over and putting stuff with the child. And I just sat there and I thought, that is the way society is. Like this is the way
mhm.
these addictions that are coming now are different from when I was in my active addictions, and I'm so thankful that I got recovery when I did, because I think the phone's a dangerous thing, and if you put the phone and gambling together,
Mhm.
mate, that's fucked.
Uh, I'm addicted to my phone. Like I've came off social media several times just because
Same, yeah,
it's all dopamine hits. A lot of
yeah,
micro. I got so obsessed with creating content and all the other bullshit it comes along with, and it took me a while to realize it's not about that, because the way when people relate to me is when you're completely you're completely honest, you're completely transparent, and you're yourself. I don't give a shit about making fun TikToks and all that stuff. I just I'm winding down with my Instagram now, because I've said everything I could possibly say, but I always keep it open, because there's always a message. I always get a message, because there's not a lot of people that are, especially on Instagram. When I started Instagram, I think it's 5 years ago, there was only two other pages that were chatting about gambling. And I
that
looked
was it.
across
Two,
Instagram. That was
two,
it, two. So I was like, well, someone's got to do this, so
yeah,
I'll
man,
do it then. Just told my story, and the if people will relate to you if you're just honest with your experiences. So I get not so much now, because I'm not as active, but I have had a lot of messages. You got a lot of
yeah,
messages, and not so much from gamblers, from affected others. I got a lot of kind of mums and stuff.
do you?
They kind of see a bit of their story, in their son or daughter.
Yeah, man.
and they're looking for support and help. Because the other thing as well, it's not obvious where to signpost, and I know, I know inside out where to send people, but it's not very obvious that where would you go. I mean, you ask an average person, what would you do if your son was presented with gambling? You probably 9 times out of 10 someone say, well, go to your local GP. But would your local GP know what to say to you or where to turn you to? That's the other question. Would they know? Because we're working on that. I mean, we're working on trying to kind of get like GP toolkits and whatnot, and give them the information that they need, and trying to link up the support that's already there, link it up together, and keep these pathways open. And then when you're talking about someone's treatment journey from accessing support to receiving support to aftercare, and we're trying to kind of link everything up so people have got options and support. And
Yeah. This is it. And do you know what? Professions need to understand and accept it's an issue, like you say, in its own right as well. And I'm pleased that you're telling me that is a route that it's going down. But would you say it's slow, or is it moving along pretty fast?
Painfully slow.
Yeah, because that's what
Painfully
I'm
slow.
thinking. I knew you was going to say that, man. I knew you was going to
Yeah,
say that.
it's frustrating for me, especially in Scotland, because 9 years ago when I reached out for support, the same support services still exist, and that's no knock on them.
Yeah,
We need whoever's already here. We need them, but nothing's changed, and a lot of that is down to politics,
yeah,
money. Scotland's devolved in terms of the NHS, so there's now 15 NHS clinics in the process of being open in England. There's none up here. There's been, the Gambling Act got reviewed recently, but of course that was through the pandemic, and you had 6 different MPs that were in charge of that, and they all got, cabinet reshuffled and whatever else,
yeah, yeah.
and it's just been passed from pillar to post.
It's not on the
And
top of no one's agenda, is it?
No, it's not. It's good. It's what you need is for this kind of conversation to go mainstream. That's what you need, right?
Yeah,
You seen what happened a couple of weeks ago with the post office thing, right? And then all of
yeah,
a sudden,
mate. Yeah,
the
yeah,
action
hundred
was happened.
percent.
You
Yeah,
know, you need a huge celebrity or a big Netflix special or a big expose or something like that, where the curtains pulled completely back. It takes a public interest, and then all of a sudden, you get changes being made. Because at the moment, what we've got is there are treatment and support services available, and I always say to anyone, it's like, try, if you're fortunate to have anything in your area, whatever, just try different, all the things you can, and don't give up. Because there's not always the right answer. There's everything from GA through to there's not, it's called the NGSN, National Gambling Support Network. So that's a group of treatment and support services throughout England, really, but we've got a couple up here. And yeah, I just want to see more of it, more funding. But because it's such a political space, where now, because the gambling that's been reviewed, we're now talking about, where money's delegated, who's in charge of it, what does treatment look like, when's it coming. And I've asked these questions 1,000 times up north in Scotland, and
right.
you get a lot of head nodding, you get a lot of, yeah, we hear you, and yeah, we understand, but
And they do fuck all.
those are your words, not mine. But it's not so much that. It's just that nobody seems to know. That's the thing. No one knows the answers, and they would love to tell you. It's just a case of, well, things are, because the political landscape's changing. Of course, everything gets pushed back a bit, and then before you know, it's months and years and whatnot. I was beating on this drum years ago, and I got so frustrated that I
Yeah,
just saw I can't have this conversation anymore, because I've said all we can say in terms of, we've got we had a lived experience group who, we get access to maybe like folk that are high up in the health service and whatnot, and we try and kind of put our point across. And then you get talks of like, oh, well, there might be a pilot here, and there might start this there and whatnot. But unfortunately, as I say, it's been 9 years, so I've still yet to see any tangible change up here, especially.
Darren, I'm sitting here thinking, right, and it's a subject that I've got to touch upon because I'm thinking to myself, you've explained to me how mentally unwell that you were when you was in your active addiction. So the the suicide rate for men and women who have got gambling addictions must be fucking high.
It is high, yeah, and I'm not one for statistics and stuff, because I think a lot of them can be skewed.
I agree.
Um, but it is high, and I can totally see why it would get
So
that
can I.
bad for
Yeah,
people. Because I wasn't at that point. I was fortunate that I managed to get support and just have everything line up for me when it did. But I could totally see how it could get that far for me. I could totally see it. If I was 2 or 3 bad decisions away from my life just going to shit, and the good things in my life for my girlfriend, my wife, and like I've got a bloody cot behind me now, so we've got a
Yeah,
baby,
man, I
and
saw that.
my
Yeah.
yeah, and I kind of when I met her, I knew that she was if she was stuck with me, it was we were gonna have like a really great future together and whatnot. If I had lost her, and then I was kind of pinging about from job to job, and the jobs I were doing as well were very intense. I was working in social care, I was working in addictions and homelessness and all that, and mental
Okay.
health, and so I'm neglecting my own mental health doing
Yeah, man.
those kind of jobs. Um, I could see how I could have got to a dark place.
I'm sitting there thinking, like, if you're gambling, you can gamble that much that it affects your family home, can't it? Do you know what I mean? You don't pay your mortgage, you can get repossessed. The guilt and shame that must put on someone
Yeah, so
can become unbearable, isn't it?
so they call this legacy harms. So you've got someone, and I've seen this over and over again in my circles. I've met people who I consider to be like some of the best people I've ever met, and I know nothing about their history. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh shit, I'm off to jail because you're sitting in a court case because they maybe committed fraud or stole from their work or something like that. Their credit ratings, you know, not there. They've maybe their house is getting repossessed, something like that. Maybe they're not able to pay back the money that they've stolen. So now it comes off the wife's money and it comes off the house, and then they lose their house and things like that. And these things happen over and over again. People go to court and I think it's the luck of the draw, to use a gambling term, of who the judge is and what their understanding is.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
you've
yeah.
got you've got people who are in recovery that are doing a huge amount of work on themselves, and then they're 2 years in and they're in a really good place, and now they're off to jail, or
Yeah, man.
they're not able to kind of build a future because they're sitting on the harm. It's sad, and you try and give people hope and give light that there is value in what they're doing, and but it just if I could not imagine now if I'm doing all this work on myself and I've got to think about all that kind of shit in the background. So as I say, it's like I find myself very fortunate that I'm in a position where I'm free of that. I don't have anything hanging over me, because if I had not only if I had gambled a huge amount of money and then I've got debt hanging over me for months and years, I would find that incredibly difficult.
Incredibly
I really would.
difficult, and that
Yeah.
and that is where a lot of people will be. So
Oh
if
yeah.
there isn't the help out there for them, then there's limited choices, isn't there? And this is so I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, I'm guilty of this also. I'm going to put my hands up. I'm guilty of this. So I've started a service. I run a service, a community project that's for addiction, yeah, drug and alcohol addiction. But I've not looked at gambling in this, right? And I'm sitting here talking to you, thinking, why ain't I? Right? That's the reality. Why ain't I? And I'm going to come away from this podcast with the view that I am going to look at that, and I'm going to be talking to you, if you don't mind, after this podcast as well, because that's something that I now need to implement into the service that we're running within our town here. Because I've fallen foul to that as well. I've fallen foul to that. It's like I've ignored it as an issue, and I've got to hold my hands up on that one, and I'm not going to do it no more.
Well, that's brilliant, mate. That's a good outcome to have from this call, isn't it? And
Yeah,
at
man.
least ask a question, all the question to everyone and see what comes up, and then then think about what you do with that information and what services are available and local to you, and where you can link up. But I'm more than happy to help you with that, and to see how you can link up with
Yeah, that'd be wicked
appropriate
because
services for you.
people, it just seems to be that, and this my service will be another one of them, I'm assuming, but it's a drug, alcohol, and addiction, and it seems to be and addiction just chucked on the end of it, doesn't it? Would that be your perception as well?
I can't really comment on that because my world's just all the gambling, gambling kind of treatment and support services. So I don't know what goes on in other services. But what I have heard, from people that I've spoken to, is they do know when it's just copied and pasted from drugs and alcohol, because you have a lot of people that have is it comorbidities? Is that what they use? I think that's a strange term, but we've also had drugs and alcohol, and they've been through those services too, so they know when the treatment is just a copy and paste kind of job. Because with gambling, it is very specific, and there's a lot that can be different and should be different from drugs and alcohol. I don't have all the answers, but one of them is peer support. You know, if you've got someone in your service there who's gambled and wants to kind of talk about their gambling, it's such an invaluable thing to have. It really has,
Okay.
because the reason when I started my page is because I had no peer support at all, and I feel that if I had peer support, I probably would have progressed much better a lot sooner. But
Yeah.
because I didn't have that anyone to relate to or anyone to talk to, and just I was just given a counselor where it was like, oh, you know, I heard you're gambling kind of thing. It's like I can't relate to you because you're not. I can't
Oh,
fully
mate.
open up to you because you're not gonna fully get it. But if you gave me someone who maybe wasn't a counselor and just someone who's been through what I've
Been
been
there.
through, I probably would have, you know, that would have helped me out massively
Yeah,
back then.
man. Yeah, definitely, definitely. I get that. So, what's the future look like for you? Where's it going with regards to the work that you're doing? Obviously, I can see your passion, but I can see where you know where the fight needs to be and where you don't need to be as well, because you've learned a lot in the 9 years that you've been on this journey, haven't you?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm winding down just now, but it doesn't mean I'm not doing any less work. My
Yeah.
wife goes back to work in May, so I'm doing full-time childcare for a year. So I'm gonna have
Wicked.
to juggle all the different things that I'm doing. So I'm trying not to take on more work. Saying that, I've just taken on more. So I've got there's there's a coaching qualification I've done. You know, if it wasn't for coaching, I don't know where like I'd be in terms of my recovery. You know, I had a light bulb moment in coaching and everything just clicked from there. So I'm hugely into that. So I want to do some like gambling recovery coaching
Yeah,
type
but you've
thing.
got a lot to give, man, haven't you? So if you go and do your coaching qualification
Hmm.
and your experience and your growth and your recovery, you put that together, that's fucking powerful.
It is, and there's someone doing it, which is even better. You know, I'd
Yeah.
always had the idea of doing it, and someone's doing it and doing it well. His name's Steve Gerlin. He's got Reframe Coaching. It's based through Norwich.
Okay.
That's all everyone he employs is lived experience, and
Right.
they do gambling recovery coaching. So I'll be getting on board. As I say, I can't do too much. I'm doing too much just now, but it's brilliant because that's to me that's my full circle. You know, if I can do some coaching there, it would be full circle for me because that's what I always wanted to do because I could see the benefit of it because you're ticking all the boxes for me there. You've got the peer support, you've got the sort of self-reflection, you've got the work, you know, your accountability, you're meeting up every week, and it's so powerful just to see the progress you can make in a short space of time. And you don't have to. The skill in coaching is you just got to listen and ask the right
Yeah.
questions, you know, and let someone find their own answers.
That's it, man.
Um, and as I say, I that wasn't me, and I growing up, I think I was very stubborn. I was very kind of down on everything to do with mental health, mindfulness, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't my bag. I just thought I was, you know, had all the answers and whatnot. But it wasn't until I kind of dug deep and then started putting myself under the microscope is when things started really progressing for me.
Yeah. And life's different.
And life is very different,
Life
yeah.
is
And I'm
very
happy,
different.
you know.
Yeah. Well, that do you know what? That one word, isn't it? Happy. Because
Yeah.
and you ain't chasing something to find that happiness. It's there.
Hmm. Yeah, it's all there, mate. And you
Beautiful, isn't
know,
it?
yeah, it's great. It's been good, and I've the people that I've met and the work that I'm doing, and I can't fault the lad. It's been, you know, it's that's also been emotionally draining because, you know, I've kind of alluded to once you pull back the curtain, once you start learning about all the politics and all the nonsense, all that's a bit of a circus. You've kind of got to take a step back from that and just refocus elsewhere. Um, you know, and then everything that I do, I enjoy, and I'm passionate about, and that makes a hell of a difference, you know. So.
Darren, I'm going to ask you one last question before we wrap up. If I'm a viewer or a listener, and I'm struggling with gambling addiction, what would be one piece of advice that you would give that person?
So the longer that you hold on to that and not tell anyone, the more the pressure builds, and the harder it's going to be for you. So if you can open up and chat to someone, then absolutely do. Whether that be, you know, a good friend, you know, because I know it's hard to open up to your parents and stuff like that. Someone you think that might be a good ear and listen to you, open up, and that's the first protocol from there, because then you're kind of sharing that burden a wee bit. Um, nothing good's from just holding that in and carrying that weight around. The first thing you do is talk to someone. It always
Talk.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Darren, wicked. Listen, thank you very much for coming on the Sober Stew podcast.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Guys, I hope you're enjoying the Sober Stew podcast and the episode today. listen, I'm asking for a massive favour here. If you like the show, you like the podcast, and you feel like you're getting relevant content from it, please like and subscribe and share the channel, yeah? The way I see this is the more people know about this channel, the more chance we've got of spreading the message of recovery. And that might change one person's life. And if we do, that's enough. But let's look at it in a different way. If we save one person's life, that's massive. Please like, share, subscribe. God bless.
Be the best I could be and achieve my dreams. They ain't really been where I've been. They ain't seen what I seen. They ain't felt what I felt. And the smartest thing I done was reach out for help. Now I'm flying by myself.